I'm going to share with you today just some stories of our experiences at the White House, and it was a very unique time because our family was never supposed to be there. I mean, if you grew up a son or daughter of the Reagans or the Bushes, or you could almost predict that your father was going to run for president and maybe become president. But Gerald Ford, I don't think anybody thought Gerald Ford was ever going to be president someday. So before I get started, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's an honor to be here. Dad loved coming back and participating locally. The Grand Rapids and Grand Valley, and this was he had a heart for this place. This is where he grew up, and our family owes Grand Rapids particularly a lot for giving Dad a wonderful place to grow up as a young man, and the state of Michigan, and it was just a great place to find those values, integrity, character, leadership values, and Grand Rapids is an all-American city that provides that for young people, particularly when Dad was growing up. So we owe a lot to this area, and Dad loved Grand Valley. So thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. I met with a couple of students back here, and when I was coming in, somebody asked me, now with a new administration, do you get invited back to the White House and stuff like that? It's a small club who's lived there, and my comment was, well, when Dad was there, the key turned kind of to the right, and now it kind of goes to the left. So our key doesn't really work anymore. But the last time, and Marty, you were there. Last time I was at the White House was when we had Dad's 90th birthday, which would have been, 5 years ago, whatever, in the summertime. It was 2 or 3 years before he passed away. And President Bush was kind enough to invite my dad back to the White House, our whole family, to celebrate Dad's 90th birthday. And it was almost to the day that he had been sworn in as President of the United States 30 years earlier. So, I hadn't been to the White House, Marty, in probably 20 years, I bet you. And so the President Bush, was kind enough. They were going to have a little reception for us on the family quarters, and then we had dinner that night. But he took us over to the Oval Office, and I walked in and I thought about it. I thought, my gosh, first of all, I haven't been here in 20 years, but I was an 18-year-old kid when Dad became president. And I'm walking in the Oval Office thinking, how did I ever, become part of this? And I'm looking around to see if it's all the same. It looks the same. Then we go up to a small reception on the second floor of the White House before we go down to dinner. And I'm wandering around thinking, this was the family quarters, this is where we lived. And again, even though I lived there, I'm thinking it was just surreal that our family got catapulted into the White House. And I walk out, there's a screen door that leads out onto a balcony. I think it's a Truman balcony. It looks over the south lawn of the White House. And I walk through that screen door, and I look over, and to my left, in a perfect line, is Vice President Dick Cheney, former Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld, and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve Alan Greenspan, and then me, and we're standing in this perfect line. And in my head, I'm going, this doesn't make sense. And it's like one of those pictures, like what doesn't belong here? You know what I mean? So I asked Alan Greenspan to leave, and no. But we went down to dinner. We had a wonderful dinner, and so that was the last time I'd been back to the White House. So this is, it's not a club that you get invited every week, and we were very blessed to go through it in 1974. And I want to share a few of those stories with you of how we got back there and how our family became one of the. You think about it; it's so unique. Dad really the first man that became president of the United States that didn't go through an election. He was appointed vice president, assumed the presidency after Nixon resigned. That probably will never happen again in the history of this country. Let me give you before I get started here, I'll give you a little background of what I do today besides acting. I do, as Marty said, a lot of corporate events and things like that. But I went, and I think it relates to what This is about leadership and character. I went through a huge change myself about 9 years ago. And I had three very special people, about 9 years ago, stand in front of me and challenge me. And they said, Steve, we love the movies you work on, we love the TV shows, all those kind of things, but we challenge you to step away from your acting career and do something different, to be of service, to add more value to your life. And those three people, they did, 9 years ago, challenged me, and I listened to them, and I did. I walked away from my acting career for about 2 or 3 years to go be of service, as they called it. And gave up income, all those kind of things, and that was easy to do. I didn't have a family to support, so that was a easier decision for me than most. But I took off and took 2 or 3 years, and I started traveling around speaking to high school kids, middle school kids, college kids about drugs and alcohol, because of what the Ford family had gone through, 25 years earlier, when my mother, former First Lady, raised her hand, said, my name is Betty, I'm an alcoholic. And that changed the face of alcoholism in this country back in the late 70s. And you would think Betty Ford's son would know better, but 15 years ago, I too had to raise my hand and say, my name is Steve, I'm an alcoholic. And that's how sneaky a disease it is. And I should have known better. I mean, my mother was Betty Ford. So and actually, to let you know, our family's just like everybody else's. When I went to my mother 15 years ago and told her, I think I'm an alcoholic, she was just like every other mother in this country. And I remember going and saying, Mom, I think I'm an alcoholic. And she said, no, my son can't be an alcoholic. You can't be an alcoholic. I said, Mom, wait a second. You can't be in denial. You're like Betty Ford, You're the poster child for this thing, And she was just like every other mother. So we're all the same. So, but I stand here sober today, 15 years of sobriety, due to Mom's leadership, the grace of God, and a good 12-step program. So I was able to take my failure at that time and what I learned from that to get sober and go speak to high school kids, middle school kids for about 2.5, 3 years. Spoke to about 65,000 of them to be of service, to add more value to my life.